What's up, and welcome to Clarity for Parents of Athletes, bringing you stories from professional athletes about their parents and how they were raised. My name is Gabe Nosair from aclearmind.com. Not many of us are born with the athletic ability of Jarrin Solomon. He was a multi-sport youth athlete and a high-level soccer player who caught the eyes of successful collegiate programs such as the University of New Mexico and Duke. But he decided to continue his athletic journey in a sport that his father excelled at, track. Jarrin ran the 400-meter dash for the University of New Mexico before heading to the Olympics to run with the Trinidad and Tobago 4x400 relay team, winning a bronze medal in the 2012 Olympic Games in London, and then shocking the United States, a 4x400 powerhouse, to win gold in the 2017 World Championships, also in London. So what was his journey like as a youth, and what did his path look like, which led him to running success? Of course, as always, we delve into his parents' role and what he feels his relationship will be like with his daughter when she goes on her journey. As I did in the last couple interviews, I'll do my takeaways in a separate episode, so please make sure and listen to that as well. Thanks so much and enjoy. All right, so Mr. Jarrin Solomon, thanks so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So, I definitely want to get into your journey as an Olympic bronze medalist and gold medalist in the World Championships, but I really want to backtrack as far back as you can go and get the history of your family, your parents, and your journey when you were younger in sports, everything that you did. So take it away.
Yeah, so when I started sports, it was kind of like, I was always an active kid, so my parents were always looking to do something with me. I'm sure I was probably a terror in the house at some point. They wanted to get me out and get some energy out of me and stuff like that. But, when I was young, the first sport I believe I ever did was gymnastics. That was like, they put me in there, which to tell you the truth, like even to this day, I have a little daughter now, and as soon as we can get her into gymnastics, that's probably what we're going to do, just because, it was such a good base for all sports in terms of body awareness, muscle awareness, balance, and there's if you think about any sport, balance is the key to almost every sport, no matter what you're doing. If you're playing basketball, you have to learn how to balance on one leg, jump off one leg, contort yourself in the air, doing different things, shoot, that hand-eye coordination. And, the same thing with me. Obviously I did track, and, most people think like running's running. But there's a huge coordination component to it that if you don't have coordination, you won't make it very far. So, gymnastics was my first ever sport that I did. And, I did that all the way up until I basically went to high school. So, I did that till I was about 13 years old. And then finally, I had basically stayed in the sport as long as I could to be able to, not move up in levels. For a couple of years before that, they'd been wanting to move up because I'd gotten pretty good at it, but it took so much time away from, other sports. So, when I started doing that when I was about 3 or 4. And then at the same time, I kind of started doing soccer around, 4 or 5, kind of in that same realm. And that's really the sport that was my biggest first love when I was young, was soccer. And then, even through there, the biggest thing my parents stressed to me when I was young was that, just do everything, and it's funny to this day, like I tell people the only sport that I can think of that I really didn't do that's kind of mainstream was play football. And, and I asked my mom one time, I said, well, how come, everybody tells me now I should have played football. And I said, well, how come you guys never put me in football? And she's like, well, you never asked to do it. She's like, we just put you in every sport that you asked to do, like with your friends. Like, I played ice hockey, I did baseball, t-ball, all that kind of stuff, basketball, swimming, for a couple of years, but I didn't float very well, so I hated that. I don't know if it's just I don't know if my muscles were too dense or what. My sister was really good at swimming. She ended up really good at swimming, but in high school and stuff. But I just never. I liked the diving board. That was my deal. I like to do flips and stuff off the diving board. So, but yeah, I mean, that's kind of how I got my whole first start into sports. And then, I played. There was a time where I was doing 3 or 4 sports at one time. So I never forget when I was probably in the 5th or 6th grade. No, I think it was the 6th grade. I'd go straight from school at 3:00. I'd go to gymnastics from about 3:30 to 5:30 is what it was. And then I had soccer practice from 5 to 7, but we'd worked out a thing with my coach that, I was already warmed up and everything from gymnastics. So if I came, 20, 30 minutes late to practice, I was already, I was basically just missing the warm up. So I'd go straight from gymnastics to soccer. And then on Tuesdays and I believe it was Tuesdays and Thursdays, I would go from soccer and I'd go eat dinner. And then I had ice hockey practice from like 8:30 to 10.
Wow.
So there was times where and I loved it. I mean, nowadays, if I try to do something like that, I'd probably be down and out for a couple weeks.
Yeah, that's a lot.
I'd be hurting. But back then, they just stressed to staying active and, putting me in everything. And that just kind of fueled like me to get to where I am today in terms of, sports and stuff like that. Just try everything. That's kind of how they taught me when I was young.
Yeah, that's great. Now, did they ever get to a point where they were like, Jarrin, look, we love you, but after driving around, it's kind of like you got to choose something, or you have to slow down, or choose one not to do anymore?
Yeah, I mean, it really, like, my mom especially, like, she was the one who was always driving me everywhere because she would drive me in, and, I have an older sister who's 2 years older, so she was doing swimming and dance and stuff like that. So basically, I mean, she would drop me off, go pick up my sister or drop her off, come back and get me, go drop me off to the next one, then go get my sister from her sport and then come back to get me. So, I mean, she was like chauffeur service, she was the Uber of the 90s, basically.
It didn't get paid.
It didn't get paid. Exactly. So, it was one of those things where as I got a little older, and sports started to conflict a little bit, once I hit middle school and stuff like that, it was like, hey, Jer, I know you want to do all this stuff, but you can't do it all because then it started, tournaments started running into other ones and things like that. So they just said, you need to pick a couple sports, just 2 that you think are going to be your main sport that you want to do. And then, go from it that way. And so, and at that point, when I was in middle school, I started to realize that soccer was kind of where I was headed. And that gymnastics is one of those things where I was a level 6. And for people who don't know, like gymnastics, when I was doing it anyway, it went from like level 7 all the way down to 1, which was like Olympic caliber level. Mm-hmm. And I stayed in level 6 for like 4 years or 3 years, because once you went from level 6 to level 5, it went from going 3 days a week at 2 hours a day to 5 days a week at 3 hours a day. Mm-hmm. So it was like, and for me, it was obvious, it was kind of the writing was on the wall where, if I wanted to do gymnastics, that was like the sport that I was doing. That was it. There was really no room to do other things just because I didn't have the time. So that's kind of when I was like, okay, I like gymnastics or whatever, but I love soccer more. So I'll do soccer and basketball. Mm-hmm. And, ice hockey, the only reason to tell you the truth, ice hockey was one of the most fun sports I ever played. And the reason that I whittled that out was because my mom goes, all right, babe, like, here's the deal. Ice hockey is expensive. She goes, ice hockey is very expensive. And, at that age, you're growing. Like, every year you're growing. So right. You grow out of stuff. And I never forget, I only played it for 1 year because the first year my mom was like, all right, he's got all this stuff going on. I'll get all my equipment came from like Play It Again Sports. And like, it just, because it was so expensive. Mm-hmm. So she says, you can pick ice hockey if you want. I know you love it, but if you do ice hockey, then I don't have money for all your other sports because it's just that much more expensive. So I was like, okay, well, I really want to do. So that's kind of like sports kind of whittled themselves down as I got older a little bit. And, I didn't really have a problem starting to specialize, but it was basically when we were young, we cast a wide net. And then as we got a little older, then it just became a little bit more narrow in the path that I wanted to take. So that's kind of how that worked out for me.
Started reeling it in.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I remember you as a soccer player, that you were a player in a club that I was coaching in,
Mm-hmm.
and you seem like you made a choice not to play college soccer, or tell us about your experience from high school going into potentially college soccer.
And so basically in high school soccer, I played club obviously since I was like 7 or 8 years old. And, as I got older, I was like, I had a lot of scholarship offers to play soccer in college. And actually in 2002, I started going to those Duke soccer camps. Like my mom would send me over the summer for a week or two or whatever it was. And, I had impressed the Duke coaches, and they actually wanted me to play at Duke. So, but the thing was, like, once they got my test scores, like my ACT and SAT test scores, like I wasn't a dumb kid, but I wasn't like the smartest kid either. Like I was just average. I got like a 22 or something on my ACT, and the average for an athlete at Duke is 26. So once like my grades were really good, I had 3.8 or whatnot, and in high school. But then once I hit the test scores, they were like, oh, okay. So then another school, Gardner-Webb University, which is like actually right down the street from Duke, it's not very far. There were some coaches that coached at the Duke camp as well that were coaches at Gardner-Webb. So they reached out to me, and then, they offered me a scholarship or whatever the case. And I went on a recruiting visit and all that kind of stuff. And, really, to tell you the truth, the reason I didn't end up playing college soccer was because I had a high school girlfriend. And, when you're young, you're like, oh yeah, you're young, dumb, in love. You're like, oh yeah, she's my wife, blah, 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 blah. And so she was staying at school to go to UNM. And, I ran track in high school, but track for me was more like a social event. Like I didn't really take it serious, and I didn't really care about it. I didn't go to practice. I mean, I was a soccer guy, so I basically just go to the meets on the weekends. That was really the extent of how much I trained, for track. So, and then, I was lightly recruited by UNM a little bit, but not a whole lot. And so, there was probably 2 weeks before college was supposed to start, and I didn't really know what I was going to do. I wasn't sure if I wanted to leave or if I wanted to stay. And I wasn't like super, super pumped on my recruiting visits or anything like that. So then I was like, well, and my coach, who's actually my coach still now, he called me and he was just like, hey, I saw that you got second at state in track, and you're really good. You have a lot of talent. And, he knew my dad anyway from ways back. And he said, we'd like it if you would run for us at UNM. And I was like, well, let me think about it. So I did. And then I said, well, I really, want to play soccer too. And so then they said, okay, well, we'll talk with Coach Fishbein and see if, you can be a dual sport athlete. And, obviously because, soccer's a fall sport. So, I'd already missed the team for basically my freshman year, but then they came to this agreement that I could like start doing spring ball. And so I talked to the coach at UNM, and Jamie, I forget what his last name is, Jamie Clark. He's the coach at Notre. Yeah, Jamie Clark. Yeah. So he wanted me, so I'd see him in the training room and in the gym and all that kind of stuff. And he was like, hey, starting in the spring, we'd love for you to come out for spring ball with us, so we can head into next year. And I was like, okay. But then, so I started running track, and I'm like super, super competitive, and I don't like to lose in anything. And, that was my nature, my mindset. And so, once I hit track practice, like in the fall, I'm running with, the seniors and the kids who are, supposed to be fast. And, and to me, like, I never really looked at age or like, if you were a sophomore, a senior, there's a lot of kids out there that look at like, oh, well, I'm only a freshman. So, he's a senior, like he's that big bad senior that should be winning and beating and stuff like that. I never looked at it like that. Like if you were on the practice track with me, I was trying to beat you. So, we ended up training really, really hard. And, my freshman year, I ended up running like the fastest time anybody run at UNM in the 400 for like 20 years.
Oh, wow.
And so, they gave me a book scholarship. That's all I had my freshman year. So, after my freshman year, I got second at conference as a freshman. and I'm qualified for regionals as a freshman. I think I was like one of five or something like that in the region as a freshman. And I got absolutely annihilated at regionals by an Olympic gold medalist. And so it was like, but that was kind of the way my season ended. And so they brought me into the office, the track office. And at first I thought I was in trouble. They said, Jay, we'd like to talk to you about something. Can you come down to the track office? And I was like, oh, okay. So I went down, and then they just offered me, they said, hey, you had a really great year and you have a lot of talent. Like, we'd like to give you a full ride scholarship, but the only thing is you just can't play soccer. If, you'll be the only kid on the team with a full ride scholarship. So I was like, well, okay. So that's kind of how I got away from soccer and went into track. That was basically it in a nutshell.
Man, pretty cool. So you must have at some point, a lot of athletes, high level athletes or high level anything, they say that they turn a switch on when they finally realize that, okay, I can be good at this and I want to be serious at this. When did you flip that switch?
So, yeah, I mean, for me, it really wasn't like, even though I ran really good as a freshman, I didn't do all the things that like I do now and that I see, that you have to do as a pro or a high level college kid, my freshman year, to tell you the truth, like I really just messed around. I trained super hard when I'd go to practice because I just don't like to lose. So it'd be no different if we were playing cards at home on the weekend. Like every time I would go to practice, I would train really hard. So, but when it was come to things like off the track, like I'd stay out late, hang out with my friends and drink with my friends and, party, do the college stuff, and then so every year you go away for winter break and coach gives you a list of 6 weeks, for your workouts of what you're supposed to do for that winter break. And I didn't do one dang workout. My freshman, sophomore year, I would go snowboarding. I'd hang out late. Like literally, I just relaxed and kicked back. So basically all of my training that I'd done in the fall just kind of went away a little bit because I kind of let myself go over the winter break. And then I'd come back and I'd have to like basically run myself into shape once the season started in January. And so like my freshman year, I'll never forget it. Actually, my wife and I were talking about this the other day. I went my freshman year, my first race I ever ran in college, indoors, I ran 52 seconds, and which is horrendous. It's horrible. Like, it's not good. Like, girls run faster than that. Some of the good college girls run faster than that indoors. And I got blasted, and I'm just like, out of shape and throwing up. I'm like, oh man. But then I'd always run myself into shape and, throughout the season. So I was like, okay. So for me, my first 2 years, freshman and sophomore year, I did that. I was kind of like the plane that I was on. And I saw success. Obviously, like I said, I ran 46.9 as a freshman, 200. And then my sophomore year, I ran like 46.7 or 46.8. So I was still progressing. And it was more due to the fact that I was probably getting a little bit more maturity muscle-wise and that kind of stuff. But it wasn't till my junior year where I actually like flipped the switch and said, okay, started paying attention a little bit more to track and field and kind of letting the stuff, like paying attention to my body a little bit more, letting like the stuff off the track go. And actually that's my junior year is the year that I actually broke up with my high school and college girlfriend, like for good. Mm-hmm. So that really, like, I mean, if she ever did anything for me, that was probably it, like we broke up. And so I had much more time to pay attention to what I was doing and paying attention to what it meant to be good, and what I had to do to be good, doing all the things, eating right, not, or eating relatively right, not going out on the weekends with my friends all the time, getting good sleep, going into the gym. Cause even my freshman and sophomore year, I lifted weights, but I didn't do it like I didn't really care if I progressed. Like I didn't really, I was just like, okay, I'm in the weight room with everybody else because coach says it's what we got to do. So, okay. But it wasn't until my junior year, I got into the weight room in the summertime and started working with the strength coach down there. And really, it's kind of funny because I did a lot of things out of, like I was mad when we broke up, like, and I was just like, she's dumb or whatever, blah, 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 blah. And so my goal when we first broke up in as a junior was, down at UNM, there's the Daily Lobo, and every week, there's like an athlete of the week in there. And so it's kind of spiteful, but it's kind of funny now because we're friends now. So I look back on it and I'm like, every week my goal was to be the athlete of the week so she'd see my face in
Oh, that's some external motivation there.
it. Yeah. So, so that's kind of what flipped the switch for me to really take it seriously and understand like, okay, I have some talent and I can do well because, and it proved, my junior year is the first year I made my first world team. So, just doing all those things right. And I was like, okay, I can compete with the best guys in the world. And, if I keep on this trajectory, I could be pretty good. And, even at that time, I didn't think about being an Olympic medalist. I just thought about like progressing. But, it was really my junior year in college after I'd already run for a couple of years.
Awesome. So kind of a late bloomer, so to speak, in the athletic world.
Mm-hmm.
So, you mentioned your dad, and for people listening, your dad was an Olympian himself for Trinidad and Tobago. And now I can imagine somebody at a high level like that, you have a son, and then you have expectations not just for your son, but you had a sister as well. Like, what did your dad did you feel expectations from your dad, or did your dad tell you or your sister like, hey, I have these expectations of you as an athlete?
Like, no, not really. And that's the one thing I can tell you about my dad. He would get mad sometimes when I would do stuff like in soccer or, if I got a yellow card or a red card or something stupid, he'd get mad, but not like, he wasn't like hard on me per se for sports. And he wasn't like one of those parents who, is like, wants to see me win or wanted to see me win at all costs and took the fun away from sports per se. Like every once in a while, obviously, you have those tiffs with your parents or whatnot. Like him and I would get in an argument about a game. This is more when I got older, about a game or, how I could have done this better or that, blah, 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 blah. But for the most part, he never really like, cracked the whip on me per se. And there was actually a time when I wasn't playing a lot in club when I was probably, I don't know, 11 or 12, I was in middle school, and that was a time where I was still doing all those sports. And so I wasn't able to focus as much on soccer as, I probably should have. And, so my dad, I never really played that much. And so, some parents would go to the coach and be like, why aren't you playing my son or daughter? And, they're kids, blah, 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 blah. But he really, his point of view was more of like, cause I think because he was a professional athlete, like he understood working hard and understood like nobody's just going to give you things for free unless you earn them. So, I never forget, there was a time where he went and he asked Coach Jorge, and he goes, he says, what is the reason, Jarrin's not really playing that much? Is there something that he's doing wrong in practice, or what's kind of the reasoning behind it? And, Coach Jorge was like, well, because he doesn't have these foot skills that we need because he misses the first part of practice, or, he told him what it was. And my dad didn't get mad at him. Like, how some parents are just like, oh, my kid should play at all costs, And he came home and he was just like, well, this is what Coach Jorge said you needed to work on. So if you want to play, I guess you got to get proficient at these things. And once he came home and told me that, I'll never forget, I went outside one night, and we used to live like out kind of in the boonies. Well, it's not that, it's not the boonies now. It's kind of been grown into, but North Albuquerque Acres. They had just built a house, my parents. And so, we had like an acre of land really, but our house was on like half of it, and we had no landscaping yet. So it was just the house on a dirt, lifted dirt foundation kind of thing. Mm. So when he told me that, for like a week straight, I'd go home after school or after practice, and I would run laps with my soccer ball around the house, just working on my foot skills and cutting and turning and running back around just in circles, just keeping the ball close to my feet, because I knew that, obviously on dirt, the ball is going to roll a lot faster than on grass. So that's how, he came and just told me, hey, if you want to play, dude, you gotta be proficient in these things. And so after that, I became proficient in them over that season. And then the next year I never came off the field. So it was just one of those things where he wasn't like super hard on me. Mm-hmm. In terms of, I see some parents that are super hard on their kids from a young age, and which I think is kind of crazy. but he was a realist, which I think helped for him because he was an Olympian and stuff like that. So he understood people don't just hand you things. So that was kind of his mindset behind, helping me, navigate the, being frustrated of not playing or, things like that.
I've had that same experience with myself as a coach, where I've had parents come up to me, of course, and call me and tell me their opinion about their child and, what I'm not doing right myself. And I wondered how things would have turned out for you if your dad would have basically just yelled at the coach and that's it, and say, my son's better than you think, something like that.
Mm-hmm. And I think it was more like, when you have parents that I see a lot of parents these days, and, we're kind of dealing that with my nephew right now. He's 6. And, I think a lot of parents, they don't know, and I don't know if they do it on purpose, but a lot of them live vicariously through their kids. Mm-hmm. So they want their kid to do well, not specifically, they want their kid to do well, but they want their kid to do well so that they can look good and feel good about their kid, instead of just going and saying, little Mikey, he's really good. And, he's enjoying his time. He's loving the sport, of what he's doing. They're like, if they win, they feel like they've just won the Super Bowl, and it's like they do it. So, for example, like my nephew, he's 6 years old and he plays in this flag football league. And, my sister and his dad, they're not together anymore. And, so his dad is very that way. So he's on this team, and my wife and I have gone the last couple of weeks to watch him play and stuff. We'll watch it because he plays baseball and flag football. And so we'll go and watch his flag football team. And like I said, he's only 6 years old. And last weekend we were there, and these parents were yelling at each other. They were upset because one other parent was on their side of the field, like in between fields, because his one kid was playing in the game that my nephew was in, and then his other son was on the field right next to it playing in another game. And so he's like in between, like cheering for both teams. And they were mad because this parent was on this side cheering, blah, 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 blah. And they're cussing and carrying on. And, my nephew, he's not even getting to play, and he's only 6 years old. So because these parents, like, they want this team, which they ended up winning the Super Bowl on Sunday, but this team is like the best team, and they always want to win, and they don't care if they beat a team, 10-9 isn't good enough. They want to beat them 60-0. Like, they want to humiliate the other team. And I asked my sister, I said, well, how come you put Justice on this team? And he says, well, it's his dad, he wants him to, and I said, oh, okay. I understand the whole other story, but I'm like, all right, well, I said, well, why does Justice even come? He doesn't play. Like, he doesn't get to play. And I said, well, he's only 6. So there's a time and a place where, as a parent, like, if it was me, I told her, I was like, I would take him off that team and say, if you're going to play football, we're going to put you on a team where maybe it's a little less competitive, because it's only, like, at that rate, it's only for the parents. It's only for the coaches, like the 6 years old, like, they don't really understand and grasp the concept, like, of, the whole totality of sport. So now my nephew, he's like, his whole world, like, if he's like, well, I only have fun if we win. And I'm like, dude, well, you're going to lose a lot more than you win in life. Like, in terms of sports, like, it's just, you have to have fun when you're playing. And I'm sitting here thinking, I'm like, this kid's 6 years old. Like, they should be playing these kids all the time, so they get used to playing and understanding the game. Like, that's the level of where it's about. It's 100% about the kids. Like, it's just so that they're learning and understanding it. And instead, these parents have taken it to a whole other level of, like, they're yelling and screaming, and then the other parents on the other team are yelling and screaming back at these parents, and then they're yelling at the referees. I'm going, the kids are 6. Like, you're not in the NFL, and most likely not a single one of these kids on this field will play in the NFL. And, it's like, you guys are playing. Nobody's paying your kids to be here. Like, you're paying to play. And so, I think that, like, that's kind of what I see that a lot of parents kind of miss the boat on, is that most coaches are going to want to win, depending on the level. They're going to want to win. Yes. Cause that's what competition's for, is to have fun and to win, And so if your kids aren't proficient in the skills, or they're not understanding the schemes of what the coaches are trying to do, well, then it's not up to the parents to tell the coach what to do. It's up to the parents to understand why they're not playing and help the kid figure out how to, combat that and to gain those skills or be proficient in what the coach is wanting, And so I see that, a lot with some of these parents, like they just kind of live vicariously through their kids or, and they push their kids to the point where after they get to, high school or college, the kids are like, well, I don't want to do this anymore. This is boring. Like, I don't like it. I'm burnt out. So,
Yeah, if the reward is always to win instead of enjoying the journey of just being in the sport and getting as much fun out of it as possible, that reward of winning is never enough. You could win the Super Bowl and the next day that buzz is over and there's something else to win.
Exactly.
And like you said, your nephew, he's not going to really enjoy it at all and not going to continue in the sport. And if you're going to be good at something, you have to love it deeply.
Right. Well, and it's like you have to learn the basics, And I was telling like my sister, I said, well, look, I mean, they're up 42-10 and he's still not in the game playing. And I'm like, at some point as a coach and as a, parent, for a team like that, that's where I step in and say, well, I mean, he's one of the younger ones or smaller ones on the team or whatever. So I get it, but when you're up this amount of points, like he should be playing every snap. Take the kids out who play all the time and put him in and let him gain some just knowledge of where he's supposed to be. And, these coaches and parents, like I know I played in the professional flag football league last year. So, I get it. These teams, I'm playing with other NFL guys that no scheme. I mean, they know football obviously in and out, Super Bowl champions and stuff. And it's like some of these coaches and parents are trying to run the same schemes with a 6-year-old as they do in the NFL. And it's like, you're telling a 6-year-old to guard that area. He doesn't know what that means. He's just looking at the ball.
Yeah.
He's literally looking at the quarterback. He just wants the ball, So, it just, I mean, it's one of those things where, fun. When we were young, that was really what the sport was about. For me, all my sports was about enjoying it, having fun, and competing, doing the best that I could with what I had and just competing and enjoying every step of it. And then eventually, obviously, it led me to where I am. But my parents never put me in that, like, they never got mad at me per se for, losing or something like that. It was part of sports.
Yeah. I mean, that's what makes you better, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I love that you ended up with track, that's what propelled you to be so successful. So I want to hear a little bit more about your journey on the national team for TNT and the Olympics, World Championships, and I watched your races yesterday on YouTube, and especially in that World Championship, man, you ran a fantastic first leg. What was your experience like in that race, and what was your mentality going into that final race of the World Championships in 2017?
Well, and it's funny because, one of my teammates from the 2012 Olympic teams, we were talking, he called me, I think it was like Saturday, and we were having this conversation just about the sport in general. And I said, you know what, Eddie? I was like, in 2017, because we were talking about just crazy how things work out and how races and everything's come together like when they're supposed to, or, crazy things happen, and it's like in 2017, like actually for me, I mean, a lot of people don't know this, but that was one of my worst legs I've ever run, like in terms of like popping it off, but we ended up winning the World Championships. But then there was like 2012 or 2016 in the Olympics, my first leg was one of the best legs. Like I had the fastest split of anybody out of all the teams in the first round. And it was like, but we got disqualified and we didn't make the final. So it's like, you have all these little victories and defeats within side of things, but the way things are, sports is one of those things, like they work out the way that they're supposed to. And the journey kind of comes along. So, 2017 was a tough year for me, just kind of mentally and physically in the sport, because I wasn't having as much fun in the sport as, I'd had in years past, just due to, politics and, it's like any pro sport, there's politics and everything. So I wasn't having the fun that I really was used to having. I went through some injuries, I strained my hamstring and then my back went out on me a couple times. And so, I just had, leading up to that World Championship race, it was like I had the worst year in terms of racing and health and stuff like that. but I ended up with the best possible result.
Huh.
So it's like, it's just crazy how that all works out. But it was because I never really, one thing about me is like, I never really give up. So even though my year was really crappy, and like, I mean, there was a time where I'd flown to a race in Florida, and the night before the race, like my back went out when I was just jogging, just doing a little light shakeout. And so like to even like stand up straight, like it would spasm. And so it was like really bad. But, you know, that experience, like the world championship experience, kind of what it ended up telling me overall, and what I tell to some of the other kids or younger people that ask, is like, you know, you never know how, you know, how the race is going to shake out, but you know that if you don't give your best, then you won't get a good result. So no matter what shape you're in or how you're feeling, like if you just give your best on that day, the only thing that can happen is, you know, if you don't give your best, nothing good will happen. But if you give your best, positive, even if it's not that great, you know, good things can happen. And, you know, leading up to the race, you know, I actually wasn't even supposed to run in that race. And because me and one of the team coaches, we don't really get along very well, because he's just really closed-minded about a lot of things. And so I'd flown all the way over to London, and I'd been there for 2 weeks, and then he wasn't going to run me in the 4x4, you know, over just a lot of political stuff. And so I told him the night before, I said, well, you know, I've got a wife and a pregnant wife. Nobody really knew then. I was like, but I have a pregnant wife at home and another business at home. Like, I'm done kind of playing these political games. You know, I'm not going to sit. I'll just fly home tonight. Like I'm done wasting my time, you know, here. And I was just going to retire then and call it good. And so I told the team manager and the head team coach, I said, look, man, I've been in this team for 9 years at this point, or 10 years at this point. You know, I made my first world team in 2007. And I said, and, you know, this guy, you know, to be treated like this and just have all these, you know, this political stuff, like I'm not here for that, you know? And so I told him, I was like, I'll just go home. And then they're like, well, you know, wait, let's have a conversation. I said, okay. So we talked about it. And then the next day nobody had said anything. I didn't know I was going to run that race until about 12:30 that day. We had a team meeting, and they came back and they said, we had a conversation, and we're going to put you on first leg. And I said, okay, you know, because it's one of those things like I don't, there's a lot of guys, like I've been in the sport long enough to where things like that don't freak me out. Like I don't get super, like everybody has nerves, you know, before you run. But I was just like, you know, there were some guys on our team, like if you told them that they had to run anchor leg, they would be like, oh my gosh, I can't do that. And it's crazy to think that like at the pro level that there's still pro athletes that have that mindset of like, they're scared. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, you know, to some of those guys, like, hey, we're going to put you on first leg. All right, that's cool. We're going to put you on third leg. Cool. That's all right. You know, because I realized 400 is 400. And if you're in shape, it doesn't matter what leg you run. You know, as long as you're in shape and you feel confident in your training and stuff, you will do well. So, you know, and that was, so to win in 2017 and defeat the U.S. and, to run a national record and all that kind of stuff, it was just kind of came full circle to show me that, you know, I did the right thing by never, you know, not giving up the season and still, trying to do my best and training hard and stuff like that. You know, it ended up being, like I said, it went from my worst season to the penultimate goal, you know, of being a world champion. So, you know, kind of happened just that quick.
That's awesome. And you know what? I want to ask a question. What's it like mentally? Because in that race, you guys were behind, not on your leg. I think it was the second leg where there was a pretty big gap between where TNT was and where the U.S. was, maybe like 10 or 15. I couldn't tell how many meters. But what's it like when you're staring in front and there's somebody that far ahead of you with just a couple laps to go?
You know, it's so in the 4x4, 400 in general, basically 4x4 is like, I would rather be, and there's kind of a mentality and it's kind of a saying, like, I would rather be the hunter than the hunted, you know? So it's like, if you're in front, there's a little bit more pressure on you than the guy that's in second or third. So like, I was looking at it and I knew Jarrin was in really good shape. So I'm like, I bet you he catches him. So in my mindset, I was like, I bet you he closes the gap at least, you know, a little bit. And so, which he did. And it was one of those things like when you're in second place and you're in a relay, like you're just trying, you're not thinking about time. You're not thinking about anything. You're just thinking, okay, I just got to catch this guy. You see where you see where you need to go, and you see how far you are behind. So you're like, okay, what do I got to do to make this up? Whereas when you're in front, you're like, okay, I'm not sure how much far, because you can't tell distance, you know. So you're sitting there going, okay, unless you're looking at the jumbotron or whatever. But you're like, okay, I can't tell distance. I just know I have to kind of keep it in front of me. Like they're all gunning for me. Like I'm the target. So it's like, you know, I love being in second place, honestly, when I'm running a relay leg, because I can judge, not obviously when I hand the baton off or when I finish, but, you know, during the race, I'm like, okay, you know, being in second, it's not bad. I know what I got to do. So when I was watching it, I'm going, you know, all these guys are in good shape. And I'm pretty sure that, you know, I was confident. I didn't know if we would win, but as the race progressed, I could, because I know everybody and know all the guys and on all the teams, I knew as we were getting closer that our anchor leg would catch. His name's Fred Curley, because he'd run a whole entire collegiate season, and which means he'd run a ton of races, and his body was probably tired. And why the U.S. put him on anchor leg is kind of beyond me. But once I saw that he was running anchor, I was like, we can win. And then, you know, he ended up doing it. So, I mean, obviously there's a lot of things that go into the mindset of like a pro, like what we see and like strategy and stuff like that. But that was kind of like my mindset during the race once I handed it off.
Wow. Yeah, it's kind of like, you know, I don't know if you watched Champions League.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Barcelona was, after the first leg, they were up 3-0 against Liverpool.
Mm-hmm.
Liverpool obviously came back, and I was talking to my friend, and I was like, man, it's almost better in those kind of situations to be up 1-0 or even down 1-0
Mm-hmm.
than it is to be up 3-0, because you get a little more complacent, kind of like what you're talking about, being in the lead.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's true. I mean, you know, to think that Barcelona ended up coming, or Liverpool coming back to win and beat Barcelona after being down 3-0, it's like, you know, it's one of those things, like I said, you see the work that, okay, I got to win. I got to beat you by 4 goals.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like, or I got to beat, you know, like I got to beat you by 4 goals. And that's kind of like it's a little bit easier to see the task at hand. Whereas like for Barcelona, they were probably thinking, oh man, we just gotta, you know, win the game or tie the game, or, you know what I mean? Like they're already in a defensive mindset. So, you know, Liverpool was able to come back and win, which was crazy.
Yeah. Everything about the Champions League this year has been awesome. So I'd like to sidestep slightly, still focusing on track. Now, you've been pretty outspoken about athletes who dope, and you're pretty focused on staying clean. And what, first of all, motivated you to stay on the clean path, and were you ever tempted to go into the doping path?
Yeah, so, you know, to me, I always thought that, and I've always felt that sport's a privilege, it's not a right. So, you know, I think that like, you know, you see all these athletes and a lot of them get caught up in the money and in the winning at all costs. And it's because it's kind of like you were saying earlier, like you might win the Super Bowl the one day, but the next day you're just back to, okay, it's a new day, you know? And so a lot of the athletes, especially with track and field, the way that it works is like all the money is basically sponsorship based. Like there's not a ton of money in the races. Like, yeah, there is some, like if you win the world championships, you might get 50 or 60,000, or, you know, if you win some of the bigger meets, you might get 10,000 or 8,000, whatever it is, you know, but it's not like winning the Wimbledon or winning the Masters in golf or something like that, where you make your entire, you know, career off of one major tournament. You know, you win the Masters, you're set for life. You know, you win the Super Bowl, you know, as a good player, you're set for life if you're smart with your money anyway. You know, and so it's like, you know, track and field, there's always that temptation, because even when you're doing well, because a lot of the companies, like, they'll look at you and they'll say, okay, for example, if you get a contract with Nike, there's going to be a clause in there that says, okay, your contract is for 2 years or 4 years, and you must stay within the top 5 or the top 10 in the world in all those years. And if you drop out of the top 10 or top 5, whatever the contract says, then we cut your salary 20% or 30%. So, you know, and what happens is a lot of these athletes, I mean, that's ultimate pressure. I mean, because you got to think, you're running against the entire world. This isn't just, you know, the NBA players, or it's not just the NFL players. Like, this is like, track and field is global. So there's constantly young athletes coming up from all over, from all different continents and countries and stuff like that. So to stay at that high level, it's hard. So a lot of the athletes, and that's the same reason why Marion Jones is one of the most talented females ever to run track and field, and she's still doped. And it's because the pressure of continuing to stay good and stay on top is harder than getting there, and like, you look at Lance Armstrong, people always use this excuse. Well, when I hear people use the excuse, oh, well, that person didn't get caught doping. I said, well, that's a straw man's argument. That's the dumbest argument I've ever heard. Just because somebody doesn't get caught doesn't mean they're not cheating. Mm-hmm. Like Lance Armstrong, he was able to, pass. Basically his entire career, he didn't get caught until it was people calling him out or whistleblowing or paperwork, basically, and so same thing with Marion Jones. And, for me, I always felt that, every athlete's going to have a life after sport, and every athlete's going to be known for something afterwards. And to me, I just didn't think that having an asterisk on my name, or risk having an asterisk on my name of all my accomplishments, was worth doping, for the little amount of money in a grand scheme of life that you can really win, and it's like, so I have a daughter, and she looks up on Wikipedia or whatever and sees that I got caught for doping. She's going to ask me about that one day and say, well, Dad, why did you cheat? So how can you explain to your kid that you need to do things the right way when they look up to their parent and you're busy getting caught cheating? Wow. And it's like, so those were kind of the basis of why, I never doped. And I wanted to see what my God-given talent was, not what some pill or some needle, injection could give me. And, for example, my first year pro, which was in 2009, I graduated college, that was my last year. And so I moved. I had Marion Jones' agent, was my agent. And he made me move to Dallas to train with this coach, who was actually the first Jamaican coach to ever run under 10 seconds back in his day. So, and they said if I moved there, then Nike would sign me and I'd get a contract. And knowing that's the only way you make money in the sport really is through contracts, I was like, okay. So I moved there. Well, little did I know that this coach, his name was Raymond Stewart. Little did I know that he was actually under investigation for doping athletes before me. And I didn't know that. So it was like, I moved there in October of 2009. And which ended up being good because that's where I met my wife. But, I moved there in 2009. And then in March of 2010, I was supposed to be going to the World Indoor Championships in Doha, Qatar, and he's not showing up for practice. And I'm like, where the hell is this guy? Like, what is going on? Like, why would he not be coming to practice and all this kind of stuff? So I called my agent. I was like, Charlie, Ray ain't been to practice, bro. Like, where's he at? Like, he's not coming. He's not. And we had a couple other training partners. And so then I started doing a little bit of research, which I probably should have done before I moved there. But so I'm researching and I'm like, wait, he's under investigation for doping his athletes. I'm like, whoa. I was like, and thinking back to all the things and how it all unfolded, I realize now how apparent it was because he always wanted us to take supplements. He always wanted to do this and do that. And, I was basically, he bulked me up to, when I first met my wife, I weighed 180 pounds and I could bench press 300 pounds. I was huge. I was strong and I wasn't doping. I was just taking a lot of proteins and, creatines, all these supplements, just supplements after supplements after supplements. He had all this stuff laid out. And then I'm researching this in March and I'm like, I think they were like peppering us up to try to lead us down that path eventually. And so what I did was in March, when I started realizing all this stuff, I said, nah, man, I'm out of here. I literally in one day got up and moved to Florida and trained with one of my teammates. I said, I'm done training. I don't associate with that stuff. I don't want to be around that stuff. I don't want to be tempted to do that stuff. I don't want to be around somebody who's been doping. And I'm the same way with when I see other athletes on the circuit, like Justin Gatlin, all these guys, like they're just a disgrace to me. I look at them and I don't believe in any of the performances that they've ever achieved. I don't believe, in who they are as people. So, and I'm, like I said, I'm kind of outspoken about it. I don't have any, any qualms or quarrels. If somebody like we were talking at a meet in Grenada a couple years ago, and my buddy Kim Collins, Kim is the fastest person to ever run. He ran 997, I think, as a 41-year-old. So he like broke all sort of records and stuff. And we were sitting there at a table at the meet, and we were talking, outside of the patio, just, eating. And as him and his wife and one of our other friends, and we were talking about doping and all these people and all this kind of stuff. And same type of thing, why he never doped and why he'd never been tempted to. And so we're talking about doping. Well, there's a girl sitting next to us. Her name is Veronica Campbell Brown, and she's one of the most decorated Jamaican sprinters ever. Mm-hmm. Well, she's been caught for doping. And I'm sitting there, and everybody at the table was like, VCB, because they call it VCB. VCB's right next. I said, I don't care. That's the reason why I don't dope. Mm-hmm. Because if I'm embarrassed that people are talking about dopers at the table next to me, then I probably shouldn't have doped in the first place. Mm-hmm. As I said, I don't, for me, like, I don't feel like that's being offensive to her. That's just being real. Like, she got caught for doping. She doped, or whatever the case is, regardless of what she says. That's just, I never wanted to be that person, I've been grown and raised to think that you win through hard work and you lose through hard work. You don't try to cheat, because once you cheat, you're not only cheating the game or the sport, you're cheating yourself. It's like, how do you feel good about, winning, even though you know that you won probably by cheating? And then, a lot of people in track and field especially, they're naive and they think, oh, well, everybody's doping. So that's their excuse. They're like, oh, everybody's doping, so I'll just dope. And it's like, no, not everybody's doping. I'm here to tell you that I have a lot of friends, and myself included, that we never doped and we never thought about doping. And we still were Olympic medalists and world champions, but we did it the clean way, So I just never wanted to be that in that category or that camp, or have that asterisk and have to explain it to, my kids or my family, or all that stuff. I never wanted that, because I think God gives you a talent and you're supposed to run with it as much as you can, and that's the way that he intended it for you, whether you make it to the Olympics or you don't. So that was my whole reasoning behind it.
Wow. Yeah, I think that's a really powerful message that you're sending your daughter as well, even though she may not see the message, but she's not seeing the message that you cheated, essentially,
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Just the fact that parents, I think they lose sight on that they're role models to their children. Mm-hmm. And their children will behave like them and will follow their path on how they talk, how they act, and what they do in life, as far as just their philosophy of being,
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's hard, you get those, you're going to end up at some point having that conversation with your kids, if they're in sports or, whatever they're in. Could be in school, if my peers, classmates paper, if we're taking a math test and his papers, where I can see it and he's not covering his answer, should I look or should I just do my own work? Mm-hmm. It's kind of like one of those things that you're teaching them integrity, at the same time. And that's, integrity goes a long way, I feel, in and out of sport, in life, there's a lot of things you cut corners, at your job, or, and like I said, sports only a small portion of most people's life. And, so for your kids, that's the ultimate, lesson for most people, is to have morals and have that moral integrity to do what's right, not what becomes easier, what you can get away with, so that's kind of the message I'd always want to send, the kids that I talk to, and, my own kids, is that integrity and morals mean something.
That's awesome. So, speaking of your daughter, when, she's 1 now, right?
Yeah, she just turned 1 last month. Yep.
So when she gets a little older and she starts getting into sports, what's your relationship with her as an athlete going to be like?
So, like I said, we've talked about it. Like, the first thing I want to do is put her in gymnastics, just because I think that's a great foundation for all young kids. Just for all the body awareness things we spoke about. And then, with her, I'll kind of do the same thing that my parents did with me, is just put her in things that she wants to do. Obviously when they're young, you just kind of sign them up for stuff and then see what they like and what they don't like. And so I'm sure, we'll put her in gymnastics, and we might put her in soccer. And then, I'm sure my wife will want to put her in dance, because she did that when she was young. So, and just, for me, it's just really supporting her in all the stuff that she wants to do. and just kind of give her that support system of, and be there to talk to her about, winning and losing, how to be a good winner and how to be a good loser, and how to just take everything in stride and use all the things and all the tools that, you've gained with winning and losing, and take it into your next match or your next competition, and that kind of stuff. And then just kind of see where she goes with it. I mean, who knows? She could be the most unathletic kid there is, It's like, I don't know. So, I just want to let her have fun. I mean, she's pretty quick as it is now. I don't know. Like, my wife's like, she's not running track, because my wife knows how much I went through in track and just what the sport's all about. I said, babe, if she wants to run track and she wants to do it, then we'll let her do it. Who knows? She could be really good, So, but I just think in just supporting her in all the sport that she does, or all the activities and hobbies that she does, that's kind of going to be my main focus on, kind of helping her navigate the sporting world, or, all that kind of stuff.
That's great. So, thinking outside of your child, what advice, give me one or two pieces of advice that you would give parents who are raising athletes?
My advice to parents that raise athletes would be really to don't pressure them, because I think kids, a lot of times, the good ones anyway, tend to put enough pressure on themselves. So the more you pressure them, the more it forces them to kind of crack and end up disliking that very sport. So, and I've seen it a lot in track and field in terms of, parents, a lot of the guys that I run against, they were like phenoms, or they were world junior champions or world U champions and all that kind of stuff. And track's like all they did, and that was what they were pressed to. But a lot of them tend to burn out a lot faster. So, I think, one of my main things to tell parents is just kind of let them keep the main thing, and let them have fun, because that's really what sport's really about, is to have fun, and then kind of see where they go with it. And then, don't be harsh on them as they find their sporting journey. Don't be too critical of the way they performed, or, like I said, kind of try to keep it fun and keep everything positive in terms of, everybody's going to have a bad game or a bad match or a bad competition. That's just life. But trying to explain to them maybe what they could have done better, or if they ask, you want to create that relationship with your kids, that your kids want to tell you things and ask for your advice. Last thing you want to do is like, man, I don't want to tell my dad anything because he's just going to be mad at me. Mm-hmm. So, I just tell parents to just kind of be there to support them and to help them on their sporting journey, rather than to make that sporting journey about the parents. Keep it about, the kids and them having fun.
Beautiful, man. That's awesome. Well, Jarrin, thanks so much for being here again. I appreciate your time. Your words are just, there's no, what's the word I'm looking for? I'm thinking of invaluable. It's priceless. That's the word I'm thinking of. The advice that you gave on there, your story as an athlete, is incredible. And what you just said about the focus that parents should have is just beautiful. And I so appreciate everything, man. And good luck to you on your flag football career and the rest of your track career, everything.
Thanks.
All right.
Thanks. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on. You too. Of course.
All right. As I mentioned at the beginning of this interview, please move to the next episode for my takeaways. I hope you enjoyed it and that you will enjoy the takeaways as well. Thanks for listening. Much love to you and many blessings.